Hello, hello, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and we're going back into Liber ABA, part 2, and this one's chapter 9, the Pantacle. So, finally, a weapon that is not set in its appearance, but totally customizable and utterly intimate. Taking a look at Liber A vel armorum, subfigure 413, the following is written, quote, "Take pure wax, or a plate of gold, silver gilt, or electrum magicum. The diameter shall be 8 inches, and the thickness half an inch. Let the neophyte, by his understanding and ingenium, devise a symbol to represent the universe. Let his zealator approve thereof. Let the neophyte engrave the same upon the plate with his own hand and weapon. Let it, when finished, be consecrated as he hath skill to perform, and kept wrapped in silk of emerald green." End quote. So, wax, gold, silver, or electrum magicum. I would argue wood or stone can be used too, though every kind has different correspondences, so that would have to be taken into account. You'd be adding astrological associations by using one of those substances. If you've never heard of electrum magicum, it's mentioned in a few places by Crowley. The crown of the priest, for instance, can be made of electrum magicum. It says it in Liber 15. And it's basically just the 7 alchemical metals, melted, mixed, and cooled down. So it has everything from lead to gold, and it's basically the 7 planets, or at least the energies of the 7 planets through the alchemical metals. That the pattern is described as 8 inches across has always struck me as mercurial in a way. Perhaps because the body is a garment of the spirit, temporary and very changeable, changes with time. A symbol of the magician's understanding of the universe is to be created and approved and made upon the Pantacle. If you're a solitary magician, just be very careful. What you put on your magical weapons most certainly will affect you. So take that into account if you plan on making a Pantacle and you don't have anybody to give you advice or to oversee what you're doing. Also, keep in mind that one's understanding is to improve with time, so a new Pantacle can be made when deeper understanding is reached. For myself, when I need to dispose of, let's say, sigils or old magical weapons, for myself, what I like to do is wrap them in black silk. Black is Saturn, but in my mind I attribute it very closely with Nuit, which is the universe. So I'm creating a very microcosmic universe to conceal and to hold within it, within the black silk. It's like its own concealed universe. Whatever I'm disposing of, I'll wrap it with something just so that the silk stays. It could be something like tape or string. I'll put a binding spell on the silk to hold whatever's in there permanently so that its energy doesn't leak out in any way. And then I usually put it into the earth. You might say a prayer or do something special as you're burying it. But that's a nice way, for myself at least, to dispose of magical things safely and respectfully. So just keep in mind, if you make a Pantacle and you realize, oh, I don't really feel like that symbol's the best that I could have done, 5 years go by and you want to make a new one, that would be how I disposed of an old one. Or you could keep them both, but at least put a mental intention on which is the one that you're actually using in your ceremonial magic and which one's old and no longer connected to you in that way. Crowley writes in Liber A that once the Pantacle is consecrated, it should be kept wrapped in green silk. How you choose to consecrate your weapons is completely up to you, but please be aware I made a video on my channel recently about consecration, which might help, especially if you're new to magic. Now, on the green silk, green is the color of Venus. It represents love. It is also the color of physical nature and growth, also of decay and death. As copper is the metal of Venus, when copper rusts, it turns green too, which is interesting. At least to me. Now, the body, which the Pantacle represents, will one day die and decay. And as Magi, we should all be aware of the limited time we have in these bodies. Also, death is not something to be so sad about. It's merely another change. And in my belief, whoso masters death, fear cannot touch. See Liber Zodi, for green has another important meaning, and is why I believe Crowley chose it to encase the Pantacle. Quote, "I fly and I alight as an hawk, of mother of emerald on my mighty sweeping wings. I swoop down upon the black earth, and it gladdens to green in my coming." End quote. The Rosy Cross traditionally had a four-colored bottom segment in place of Malkuth, the kingdom, usually thought of as Earth, the physical realm, but Crowley changed the segment from black, white, citrine, and russet to green to symbolize the new aeon, the change Heru Raha has brought upon the earth, which is described in Liber L, love is the law of under will. All actions of willed intent are love, as is all change. When two things interact, both are destroyed and create a third thing from their embrace. Let me clear up next what, in my opinion, is the difference between a pantacle, lamen, and sigil. I've heard this a few different times, so I'll just add my own opinion to the mixing bowl. These three things are a symbolic representation of something, but that doesn't tell us much, for most things in magic are but symbolic representations of something. The pantacle is flat and usually round, and has a crafted symbol upon it, usually complex, which symbolizes the entirety of a deity, oneself, and or the universe. It may also have sigils within its symbol. The lamen, generally speaking, is usually meant to be worn over the breast by a chain to lay over the heart. It is most often employed to represent holy orders. It could come in a wide variety of shapes, from the circle to the Vesica Pisces, or a square like Aaron's breastplate, which represents the 12 tribes of Israel. Also, there's an Enochian lamen in John Dee's system of Enochiana that also goes over the breast, and it could be for protection, it could be to link you with the Enochian system. There's a few interpretations there. Now, if the lamen has symbols, it will represent something worldly usually, like the order's mystical teachings or a purpose of the group. Many, but not all, include the idea of active and passive duality within its imagery. Some, like I said, could be worn for protection or buffers to magical energy. A sigil, on the other hand, is much simpler. It is a small drawing, usually very simple, that invokes or evokes a spirit, entity, idea, or intent to manifest. It must be charged via ceremony and employed in a variety of ways. Many are drawn from the magical squares, or the Rosy Cross, or from some other holy thing. The power of the pantacle is quite simple. It takes inexperience, much like the body of the magician during life, combined with the symbol drawn upon it, will amount to its influence, especially if it's used to hold an epiclesis, like a cake of light. Its energy should leak into the host. The pantacle should be made with the intent of housing God, for it is symbolic of the body, and your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. For myself now, speaking about my own pantacles, I've made many different ones over the years, so I could describe a few different ones. My very first was just a couple of months after I began studying magic. I was still in state prison at that time. We're talking over a decade ago. I actually have it in my hand. So on the front is a pyramid with the eye and the triangle, and it's actually a triangle of air, so it has that line segment with a rising sun on that segment above the pyramid. On the left of the pyramid is Aleph, the letter, and on the right is a Tav, the Hebrew characters. Below I wrote Isis, Ankh, Thoth, and above the pyramid, eye in the triangle, rising sun, I put an infinity symbol, and above that a 5-pointed star in a circle next to a 6-pointed star in a circle. It was just made out of paper, and I used tape, and on the back I attached to it a 4-leafed clover, and above I wrote the Hebrew characters Chachma. So that was my very first pantacle. Simple, and with what materials I had at my disposal at the time, and also it was just the idea of the universe that I could comprehend at that time. It was my understanding back then, and I've made more since. For Liber New, I went through that book and I made the pantacle as outlined there, the blue square with a 5-pointed star with the red circle in the middle, with a sigil given to me by New Age in the circle, and stars around the pentagram. And then there are examples you can find online, and Friedrich Katz is a good example. I might even argue on the cover of Liber ABA, the big blue one, that has all 4 parts, that elaborate, many-symboled construction that's almost stretched out like a tree of life with a hexagram and a pentagram and all these different circles and colors, that could be one of Crowley's pantacles, for instance. So there's different examples you could find. Now, in use during ceremonial magic, there is a huge similarity between the Pantacle and the paten, in that they both hold the sacrament of the Eucharist, or rather cake of light. The paten is a simple dish, and the Pantacle is made of beeswax or the other materials, as I said above. Both are flat and round, which are their two principal features. The paten has no further specification, though it could be made of nearly any sturdy substance, which could add an astrological occult influence, while of course the Pantacle used to hold the epiclesis has a symbol engraved upon it, which also adds some occult influence to the communication. In Thelemic ceremonial magic, the cup and paten hold the sacraments of bread and wine, which are changed and imbued with the light in the process of transubstantiation. The wine becomes the blood of the saints, the menses of Babylon, and the Eucharist is the body of God and or the particle seed of the magician, his will that is cast forth into the universe, the Mother Nuit. This is perfectly reminiscent of the soul of man, which is Hadid in motion, ascending towards heaven, which is Nuit. During Liber 15, a particle is broken off of the cake and cast into the wine from the lance tip, which is plunged into the cup, and that symbolizes the higher mysteries of one's will being cast forth into the mother. Finally, coming to Crowley's chapter in Book 4, let's finally get into this. This was just my interpretations of some things. He adds the following considerations to the design of the Pantacle. There is, therefore, nothing movable or immovable under the whole firmament of heaven, which is not included in this Pantacle, though it be but 8 inches in diameter, and in thickness half an inch. Fire is not matter at all. Water is a combination of elements. Air almost entirely mixture of elements. Earth contains all, both in admixture and in combination. So must it be with this Pantacle, the symbol of earth." End quote. So, we must consider what this means, that everything must go into the Pantacle for it to be complete. Every impression in the universe that we experience changes and shapes us into a new and more complete being than we were previously. To refuse one life-altering experience which, unbeknownst to us at the time, that experiencing it would bring us into direct communication with our holy guardian angel, we may cause ourselves a setback of many lifetimes until we make up for the blunder and come around about to another chance to hurdle an obstacle we previously avoided. A phenomena is anything that happens in the universe which we cannot fully understand. We rely principally upon science for our knowledge, through which we understand things. Yet, science is limited to the mind and reason, and thus cannot penetrate past a certain point. We see this, for example, in quantum physics at present. We can't really comprehend fully how particles work, which make up our wider universe. Thus, when we boil it down, everything happening is still an uncertainty to us, so that everything at all times around us is technically a phenomena. The Magister Templii, who is vowed to understand all things, also vows to interpret every phenomenon as a particular dealing of God with their soul. In regards to the paten, they must sharpen the sword so that it can cut away the millions of impressions that are useless, to such an extent that they are able at any time to focus in upon the one thing at any time around them which needs to be absorbed into their Pantacle, that they may glean the message of their angel through the events happening around them. If you are new to the path and wondering how to pick an important experience from one that is meaningless, Crowley writes something very reassuring. Quote, "Fortunately, it does not matter very much, but he should at least choose those branches of knowledge which abut directly upon universal problems. He should choose not one but several, and these should be as diverse as possible in nature." End quote. Now, also to consider, Crowley recommends that you concentrate on several things in your life in general on top of magic. And these include a sport which appeals to you so that your body remains healthy, the study of the classics, mathematics, and science, and acquaintance with as many languages as possible so one can travel and communicate with these. Also add to that a good memory, which I believe is trained by studying as much of the above as you can. Doing that gives you a fundamental beginner's idea of how to just concentrate on several things and see what's important to you. The more you learn about your surroundings and the environment around you and the world around you and yourself in that world, the more you're able to kind of cut away some stuff that's less important. I mean, there's millions of colors and shapes and sounds and noises and people and everything happening in the universe around you at all times. So you really need to study the physical science behind the universe, study the physical science of biology in your body, and then learn who you are as an individual, see what's important to you, and get rid of some of the stuff in your life that is less important, and start to target in on some of the more important things in your life. And eventually you start to see, okay, this is more important, so I'm going to dedicate more time to this. This is less important, so it gets less time. This is not important at all, but I was dedicating a massive time in the past. It's got to go for my life altogether. That gives you an idea of how you start to weed out certain things in your life that are important and what's unimportant. Then, introspection of one's memories is vital, and Crowley writes, quote, "The best memories so select and judge that practically nothing is retained which has not some coherence with the general plan of the mind." End quote. I've said this elsewhere, that by looking over your past you will see in your memories things of importance to your being, and by connecting the thread of the biggest, most important memories, you could sometimes tell what may be very important to you to accomplish in this incarnation. Moving on to the consideration of what symbols should be made upon the Pantacle, Crowley gives some really great advice, which I could do no better than quote outright. Bear with me, it's a couple of short paragraphs. Quote, "All Pantacles will contain the ultimate conceptions of the circle and the cross, though some will prefer to replace the cross by a point, or by a tau, or by a triangle. The Vesica Pisces is sometimes used instead of the circle, or the circle may be glyphed as a serpent. Time and space and the idea of causality are sometimes represented. So also are the three stages in the history of philosophy, in which the three objects of study were successively nature, God, and man. The duality of consciousness is also sometimes represented, and the tree of life itself may be figured therein, or the categories. An emblem of the great work should be added. But the Pantacle will be imperfect unless each idea is contrasted in a balanced manner with its opposite, and unless there is a necessary connection between each pair of ideas and every other pair. The neophyte will perhaps do well to make the first sketches for his Pantacle very large and complex, subsequently simplifying not so much by exclusion as by combination, just as the zoologist, beginning with the 4 great apes and man, combines all in the single word primate. It is not wise to simplify too far, since the ultimate hieroglyphic must be an infinite." End quote. Karma, too, must be considered in the engraving that will go on the Pantacle and just in the Pantacle itself. Now, for the umpteenth time, karma is not a debt that had to be balanced out. It is action and cause and effect. Do one thing, a chain of things happen as a result. The only cease to doing is non-doing in the sense of the Tao, i.e., by doing your will and uniting with the highest. Only then does motion cease. Once you've become the center of the universe, and you can't go anywhere because you're always in the center of the universe, then does motion cease. Everything you have done will influence where you are and what you are likely to do once there. All of this must be considered, as well as what you need to do in order to achieve union. It is a complex matter for another video altogether, but worth mentioning in passing. For it is fear that many fail to persevere, and the Maya will do everything it can to frighten you from success in the great work. This type of fear stems from the ego and a false sense of self-preservation. Nothing can harm the spirit, but the body will decay no matter what you do. It is of the mind and body, as are all things terrestrial, which fall to the consideration of the Pantacle and the Magician. Quote, "The whole universe is an illusion, but it is an illusion difficult to get rid of." End quote. Love is the law, love under will. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.